Okay, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Let's go ahead and get started inshallah on this A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, on this day of Arbaeen. May Allah grant us the opportunity inshallah to do the ziyarat of Imam Hussein and the Ahlul Bayt inshallah. And may Allah accept our ibadat, our hajat during these months of Muharram and Safar. And we'll get started tonight with Ziyarat Arbaeen inshallah, followed by Dua Kumail. And then we'll have Marshia, Majlis, Matam, and conclude with Ziyarat Warisa, inshallah. So we'll get started with Ziyarat Arbaeen on Kalamin. Bismillah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu ala waliyillahi wa habibi. Assalamu ala khalilillahi wa najibi. Assalamu ala safiyillahi wa ibn safiyyih. السلام على الحسين المظلوم الشهيد. السلام على أسير الكربات وقتيل العبرات. اللهم إني أشهد أنه وليك وابن وليك وصفيك وابن صفيك الفائز بكرامتك. أكرمته بالشهادة وحبوته بالسعادة واجتبيته بطيب الولادة وجعلته سيدا من السادة وقائدا من القادة وزائدا من الزادة وأعطيته مواريث الأنبياء وجعلته حجة على خلقك من الأوصياء فأعزر في الدعاء ومنح النصح وبذل مهجته فيك ليستنقذ عبادك من الجهالة وحيرة الضلالة وقد توازر عليه من غرته الدنيا وباغ حظه بالأرض للأدنى وشرى آخرته بالثمن الأوكس وتغطرس وتردى في هواه وأسخطك وأسخط نبيك وأطاع من عبادك أهل الشقاق والنفاق وهملة الأوزار المستوجبين النار فجاهدهم فيك صابرا محتسبا حتى سفك في طاعتك دمه واستبيح حريمه. اللهم فلعنهم لعنا وبيلا وعذبهم عذابا عليما. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الأوصياء. أشهد أنك أمين الله وابن أمينه. عشت سعيدا ومضيت حميدا ومتفقيدا مظلوما شهيد. وأشهد أن الله منجز ما وعدك ومهلك من خذلك ومعذب من قتلك. وأشهد أنك وفيت بأهد الله وجاهدت في سبيله حتى أتيك اليقين. فلعن الله من قتلك ولعن الله من ظلمك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. اللهم إني أشهدك أني ولي لمن والاه وعدو لمن عاداه بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله. أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك المتلهمات من ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المسلمين ومعقل المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي، وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا، وأشهد أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع، ونصرتي لكم معدة حتى يأذن الله لكم، فمعكم معكم لا مع عدوكم. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وأجسادكم وشاهدكم وغائبكم وظاهركم وباطنكم، آمين رب العالمين. السلام عليكم يا سادات وموالي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلطان بالحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا شفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب الوصف والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنت. Irfan, give me a second. Let me just share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, Irfan, Bismillah.
دعاكما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النكام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفئ بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بكسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاكته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وأظمى فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم أظمى سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب كحرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لكبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من أملي الكبيه بالحسن مودلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من كبيه سترت وكم من فاده من البلاء أكلت وكم من إثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم أظمى بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وكسرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد عملي وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تؤاجلني بالعقوبة على ما أملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رعوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور أتوفا. إلهي ورب من لغيرك أسأله كشف ذري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أحوى وأسأله على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك وألزمني حكمك وبلاءك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستكيلا مستغفرا منيبا مكرا مذئنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ذري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني وركة جلدي ودكة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي حبني لابتلاء كرمك والسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذب بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد ما انتوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك وأتكده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تذيع من ربيت أو تعبد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي تسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارها سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذئنا ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثور يسير بكاؤه كثير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وكوء المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مكامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أذج، وأبكي لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فحبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وحبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء أفوك، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناتك لأذجن إليك بين أهلها ذجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاك طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أتباكها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يرج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبكى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا، أم كيف يتكلكل بين أتباكها وأنت تعلم صدقا، أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتكه منها فتتركه فيها. هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما آملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المؤاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك. قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالكذية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل كبيه أسررته، وكل جهل أملته كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره، وكنت أنت الركيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي، يا من بيده ناسيتي، يا عليما بالذر ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقر وفاكتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك، وأن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك مأمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه مؤولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قوي على خدمتك جواره، واشدد على العزيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسري إليك في البارزين، واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وخافك مخافة الموقنين، واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخسهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعتف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأكلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بإبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني منايا، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي. واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النكم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم. صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنت. Thank you, Irfan. Uncle Iqbal, Bismillah.
صلوا على النبي.
اللهم
صل على محمد
وآل محمد.
کربل کی کہانی جب کوئی بھی سنائے گا دل والوں کے آنکھوں سے ایک دریا بہائے گا وہ کارواں سرور کا جو شانوں سے نکلا تھا سغرا کو خبر کیا تھی نہ لوٹ کے آئے گا مہمان بلایا ہے اے کوفیوں سرور کو کیا کنبہ شہیدی کا پانی نہیں پائے گا پامال ہوا قاسم یوں گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے کس طرح چچا تیری میت کو اٹھائے گا تھا ہاتھوں کا کٹنے کا کچھ غم نہ دلاور ہو سیدانیوں کا پردہ اب کون بچائے گا ٹوٹی ہے کمر شہ کی گھبرانا مگر اکبر फर्जंदे नबी तेरी लाश को उठाएगा। सोते ना तुम असगर झूले में तड़पते थे। दुनिया को खबर क्या थी एक तीर सुलाएगा। करबल की कहानी जब कोई भी सुनाएगा। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि।
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ahsan, thank you. Iqbal. Before we turn it over to Dr. Takim, I just wanted to just say on behalf of the executive committee and the community at Los Angeles here, we thank you, Dr. Takim, for gracing us for the last 4 nights. May Allah grant you the infinite blessings, inshallah, to you and your family, and continue your journey on the knowledge of Islam and the Ahlul Bayt. And inshallah, we hope to see you in person in Los Angeles again in the near future. With that,
it's been a pleasure and my honor. Yeah. Fatiha. Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا يحسبن الذين كفروا أنما نملي لهم خير لأنفسهم إنما نملي لهم ليزدادوا إثما ولهم عذاب مهين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله. Salam. First of all, I'd just like to thank you, all of you, for this invitation. It's been an honor to speak in front of you. You've been a very patient crowd for the 4th night now. And inshallah, next time we'll meet in person under better circumstances, inshallah. I've been talking about ethics the past 3 nights, and I want to talk of a different topic today, one which is more geared towards the event of Karbala and Arbaeen. Because we know quite a bit about Karbala. We hear about it every year. What I want to discuss tonight is, how do we know what we know? What is it? Where do we get the information from? Because that is something that we should understand. And I'm sure sometimes you may have asked yourself, how do we know all this, what we are hearing? To start with, a historian is like a good detective. A detective is somebody who's looking for something he's not sure what of. But then he draws up what we may call a composite picture. A composite picture means a sketchy picture from different areas and brings them together. In many ways, a historian is like that. We can never be sure that exactly 100% what happened in Karbala. But we do know, we have a very good idea of what happened based on different sources. A good historian does not trust just one source, but he trusts multiple sources, compares them, contrasts them, so that he has, as I said, what we may call a composite picture. I remember when I was young, which wasn't that long ago actually, but when I was younger, we used to hear a lot in the majlises, you'll remember, Ravi kehta hai, Ravi said this, Ravi said that, and Ravi ne kaha. And I thought somebody's name was Ravi. So maybe he was just walking around with a notepad, saying, okay, what did you say? What did you say? Well, Ravi means actually a transmitter or a narrator. It's not a name of a person as such. But as I said, in those days, let's not forget, it was not it was an oral community. Oral community meant that they were not writing things down. It was passed on, transmitted from person to person. And when people are not committed to writing, they remember far more than what you and me do. You may have met, for example, blind people. A blind person can remember far more than what you and me can, because they are using their inner sight, not just their outer sight, not just their eyesight, they are also using insight. And therefore, they have a far greater memory powers than we do, because we become too bookish or too laptopish in today's world, to put it a different way. It is also wrong for us to think that whatever we are getting is only from Shia sources. Indeed, the earliest sources on Karbala were not necessarily Shia sources. The Sunnis also highly respect Imam Hussein. No Sunni would ever say a thing, would dare say a thing against the Ahlul Bayt, because after all, they are the family of the Prophet. They may not see the Imams the way that you and me do. They may not believe that the Imams are appointed by God, etc. That's a different story. But they also highly respect Imam Hussein. So therefore, we should not say that the Sunnis are wrong and we are right on these issues, at least. Another point that we should also understand, that we do not need to exaggerate or embellish Karbala, because the message of Imam Hussein is powerful enough to move the most stone-hearted person. The message itself is strong enough to penetrate the hearts of human beings. There are those who feel that we have to add some things in order to make people cry. To me, and I'm talking about my own personal experience, when I sit on the minbar, I feel that I'm occupying the seat of the Prophet himself. Every speaker, every reciter who speaks on behalf of Imam Hussein, or of any Imam for that matter, and on behalf of the Prophet, has a great responsibility. Just because I find something in a book doesn't mean that I relate it. We have to analyze it. We have to check whether it really could have happened. Look at it also from a rational point of view, because you, the audience, are smart people. If I try to just wing it, as they say, or just say something which is untrue, you're going to find out sooner or later. So therefore, we don't need to exaggerate anything about Imam Hussein, because ultimately, every speaker is responsible, and he or she will be questioned on the day of Qiyamah. You said this, where did you get it from? Why did you say it? Allama Mutahari has got a very interesting book. It's translated into English, by the way. And this is about the myths surrounding Ashura. It's a very interesting book. It's in English, as I say, the myths and fabrications regarding Ashura. And what he says is quite striking, that we should not only cry for Imam Hussein, we should also cry for the fabrications against Imam Hussein, the stories that have been made about Imam Hussein. Many a time, a speaker may speak poetic language. You see, poetry has got its own brand of language. It's not to be taken literally. Poetic language is essentially metaphorical, analogical, not literal. So we should not take everything in poetical form to be literal. So for example, we may have heard stories like it rained blood. Does not mean that literally blood came out. It means to say that it was so sad, such a solemn occasion, that even the skies were crying with blood. Again, this is a metaphorical way. It's not to be taken literally. Or sometimes you hear the voice from the sky and so on. And therefore, we should use our imagination and not take everything literally. There are other stories that we have heard many a time, and mercifully, those have not been repeated. But you'll be surprised, there are some communities that still mention it. And I'm being very open and honest with you, because I think that I have that responsibility to convey that message to you. So for the longest period, you'll recall, we used to recite the wedding of Janab Qasim on the day of Ashur. Would it really make sense for Imam Hussein to perform his own daughter's wedding to somebody who he knows is going to be killed in a few minutes? What point would there be? And therefore, that story, by the way, none of the early historians have said it. I should make it also clear that historians always go by the earliest sources first, because the earliest sources tend to be the most reliable ones. Later sources, and even much later sources, tend to have much more of this spicy and marcha masala, as I said, which mainly is there to evoke the emotions of the people. Unfortunately, we have consumerized Karbala too. Many speakers feel that if they do not make people cry, then they will not get the bucks and the dollars that they're anticipating. So we have basically consumerized Karbala. We cannot afford to do that. We, as I say, especially the speakers, are responsible for what we say. There is also this myth of a jinn which came to Karbala, Dhafar jinn. Again, this was actually, there's a book which was written in the 15th, 16th century. Imam Hussein died in the 7th century, in 680, 681 to be exact, around that period. And these books were written 600-700 years after that. How many? 600 to 700 years after that. A person by the name of Mullah, even Mullahs write not so irreliable books, by the way, Mullah Hussein Kashifi. He's the first one who talks about Zafar Jinn entering Karbala. He has a book called Rawdatul Shuhada. Rawdatul Shuhada means the gardens of the Shuhada. But yet, many of the stories in there have to be treated with great caution. Mutahari says that this mullah says that Imam Hussein, na'udhu billah, Imam Hussein on his own killed 300,000 people. How many? 300,000 people. Now, if supposing this was true, and even if, and again this is all hypothetical, even if Imam Hussein was to kill one person every second, if he was to kill one person every second, it would still take him 83 hours to kill those 300,000 people. Mutahari actually did all the calculation and maths. Said even if Imam Hussein was to kill one person per second, it would still take him 83 hours. Now we know that Karbala barely lasted a few Ashura, lasted very few hours on the same day of Ashura. So, as I said, we do not need to embellish and exaggerate the stances, the principles of Imam Hussein, because he, Imam Hussein, stood for and fought for principles that we all share as human beings. He is able to touch not only Muslims, not only the Shias, but the whole of humanity. Haven't you seen so many a time? Those of you who come from Dar es Salaam or Mombasa, we used to have processions. And sometimes we found that Hindus, other people used to join in those processions. And they had great faith in it too, because they were appealed by the message of Imam Hussein. Somebody said very correctly, this is the kind of stance that Imam Hussein stood for, that if you have nothing to die for, then you have nothing to live for. If you have nothing to die for, you have nothing to live for. You see, my sisters and brothers, what Imam Hussein was concerned about was not only that Yazid was asking for bay'at, but that the people were willing to give him that bay'at. There was something wrong in the conscience of the Muslim, not only with Yazid. There was a problem with Yazid, yes. He was calling himself Amir al-Mu'mineen and whatever he may call himself. But the people were willing to tag along. What was wrong with the conscience of the people? Something had to be done to awaken the dull conscience. That's why Imam Hussein stood for his principle. As he said to the army of Hur, إِنِّي لَا أَرَى الْمَوْتَ إِلَّا السَّعَادَةِ وَالْحَيَاةَ مَعَ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا بَرَمًا. I do not see death except as a way towards everlasting happiness. But to live with these tyrants is humiliation. I will die in honor, but I will not be humiliated. This is what we should be emphasizing on. Some of you may have heard of the name by a person by the name of Nakkan Sahab. Nakkan Sahab was a scholar in India. He wrote a beautiful work which is translated into English, by the way. Shahid-e Insaniyat, the martyr of humanity. Shahid-e Insaniyat. He presented Imam Hussein as a human being who fought for and died for principles, not this mythical legendary figure. And because of that, people even called him a kafir. They were prepared to even kill him. And he was ostracized, marginalized, excluded from the community, and his only sin was that he spoke as a historian. He was condemned for it. And many a time when you tell people, says, you're shaking our faith, shaking your faith by telling you historically what is there. You may have heard me say this, and I'll say it again, that we always talk of Dhul Jannah, Dhul Jannah. Actually, there was no horse called Dhul Jannah in Karbala. Imam Hussein did have a horse, was very fast, very speedy, and that horse was called Lahiq. Now people say you're destroying our faith. Our faith does not depend on the name of a horse, my friend. If our faith depended on the name of a horse, then our faith must be very, very loose. Huh? It must be very, very loose for us to shake it so quickly and so easily. Yes, Imam Hussein had a horse, and that horse was not the Prophet's horse, by the way, because horses only live for 25 years. The distance between the Prophet's wafat in 632 and Imam Hussein's wafat 681 is almost 50 years. So yes, and the name Dhul Janah comes much later on. Dhul Jinah literally means one who possesses wings, you know. And the reason why he was called that, because he was a very fast horse. So this is again the poetical language, that the horse was so fast it could fly. Hence the name Dhul Jinah. But that was a later name. It doesn't matter what you call. There was a horse. It was very speedy. How do we know about Karbala? Most of the reports go back to one or two people. One person that we should understand was a person by the name of Lut bin Yahya. Lut bin Yahya is commonly known as Abu Mikhnaf. Abu Mikhnaf himself was a Shia, was a lover of the Ahlul Bayt, but he was not at Karbala. He was born around that time. When the tragedy of Karbala happened, around that period, Abu Mikhnaf was born. And he, later on, as he grew up, he met with many of the eyewitnesses. There were people who actually participated in the killing of Imam Hussein. There were those of the Banu Asad, you'll remember. So Abu Mikhnaf met them and wrote and talked to them. And therefore he writes in his book, Waqala so and so, this man so and so. Akhbarini so and so, this guy told me. So Abu Mikhnaf then becomes a very important source. And as I said, a lot of people at that time, they were orally transmitting. They were not writing it down. But Abu Mikhnaf actually has a book, the Maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf. Unfortunately, that book is no longer with us. A lot of the books of the Shias were destroyed historically. Sheikh Tusi, who died in 1067 in Baghdad, Sheikh Tusi's library was burnt by those who were against him. But Abu Mikhnaf wrote this book, and a person by the name of Tabari is a Sunni, by the way. But he's very reliable. Even though he's a Sunni, he's reliable, he's up to the point. He has an 8-volume work, the Tarikh, History of Tabari is called. 8 volumes. And ironically, this is the irony, that it's been translated, the whole 8 volumes has been translated into 30 volumes in English. And who has translated it? Not Muslims, non-Muslims. Isn't it ironic that non-Muslims do our work for us? They translated the whole of Tabari, 8 volumes, starting from before the coming of the Prophet to Tabari's own time. Tabari died in the 10th century. The history. And one of these volumes, of the 30 volumes translated, one complete volume is about Imam Hussein, about Karbala. And many, many times Tabari says, Abu Mikhnaf, I read in the book of Abu Mikhnaf. Tabari did not meet Abu Mikhnaf, but he read the book of Abu Mikhnaf. We do have a book which is called the Mushtahar of Abu Mikhnaf. Mushtahar means what we people think is the book of Abu Mikhnaf, but it's not reliable at all. So Tabari then becomes an important source for us. I think that we also, sometimes our people, do not quite consider the things that they say. This WhatsApp can become a great blessing, but it can also become a curse because people just forward things without even thinking, without even considering. Where did you get this from? Or somebody forwarded it to me. I always thank Allah for that person who created the delete button, the delete button rather than the forward button. If you receive something, then before you forward it, ask, is it really happened? Is it really true? And if you don't know, then ask somebody who you trust. Because if you just forward things, then you are also participating in that sin, na'udhu billah. So I remember when I was on this WhatsApp group, somebody put down that it is our job to go to Karbala. Our job comes from the word wajib, means it is more wajib than other wajibat to go to Karbala. I said, Baba, where did this come from? They said, going for ziyarat is wajib and hajj is wajib, but going for ziyarat is more wajib than the wajib of going for hajj. I said, where did this come from? Oh, this hadith and that hadith. Going for ziyarat is not wajib, we know that. The only time, by the way, when going for ziyarat is wajib is if you make another. If you make another, that if this thing happened, I will go for ziyarat, then the ziyarat becomes wajib, not otherwise. So we should be careful of this. The other person who has written extensively on Karbala is Sheikh al-Mufid. Sheikh Mufid died in the year 1022, in the 11th century. And Sheikh Mufid has a book which is also translated into English. We should read these books. It's called Kitabul Irshad, the book of guidance. 600 pages, out of which almost 300 pages are on about Imam Ali alayhi salam himself. And again, he has a whole section on Imam Hussein. And he reports, Sheikh al-Mufid traces his reports to whom? To Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. So a lot of what we hear about Karbala is coming to us from Imam Zain al-Abidin. As I said, a good historian depends on multiple sources, not just one source. So you have Abu Mikhnaf on one side. You have Imam Zain al-Abidin, who is more reliable. But with us, we don't have as many reports from Imam Zain al-Abidin. But Mufid does report from him. And he reports, for example, on the eve of Ashur, when Imam Hussein stands outside his tent and he starts reciting a poem, which goes along the lines that nobody will escape time. Everybody will journey along the same path as me. This is what Imam Hussein was reciting. And Imam Zain al-Abidin says, when I heard my father reciting this, I knew that he was telling us that he's going to die tomorrow. And I tried to stop myself from crying, but my aunt Zainab could not stop herself. She came running outside her tent and she says, oh, my brother, what are you telling us? Are you going to die tomorrow? I cannot live without you. How can I be separated from you? This is coming from Sheikh Mufid. Again, he was a very, what we may call, very careful scholar of what he reports. There were other reporters also from whom we get the story of Karbala. You may have heard the name of Humayd bin Muslim, also called Hamid bin Muslim. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa
Humayd bin Muslim was actually on the army of Umar ibn Sa'd. As we are aware, a lot of these people were caught by Mukhtar, when Mukhtar was taking revenge for those who were responsible for the death of Imam Hussein. And one of these persons was this Hamid or Humayd bin Muslim. Actual name is Humayd. And he, that is Humayd, was given amnesty that provided he gave the correct story of what happened in Karbala. And a lot of the reports was given to us by Humayd bin Muslim. You may have heard the name many times, Hamid bin Muslim said. And whether you call him Hamid or Humayd is not it's a mute point. But he reports, for example, that the killing of Imam Hussein, the actual killing, was done by two people, not one person. The actual killing of Imam Hussein was done by Sinan bin Anas. And the cutting of the head was done by Shimr. So reports are not always very clear, and we have to be careful of that. As I said, we cannot be sure that everything happened the way that we hear it happen. But we do know that it did happen, not to the exact minute details. And Humayd bin Muslim not only talks about Karbala, but also tells us about what happened after Karbala, what happened to the ladies, what happened to Imam Zainul Abidin, and so on. The army coming to the tent and burning the tents. All are reported, and he's not the only reporter, by the way. There are other reporters too. When we hear about Karbala, and especially when we go to Karbala, I always encourage my people, and anybody goes to Karbala, that ask certain questions. Don't just accept things that you are told. Why is it that Habib ibn Madahir is buried separately from the others? Because his tribe, Banu Asad was a tribe of Habib. And Habib actually came to Karbala and tried to get the people from Banu Asad to join him to fight against Umar ibn Sa'd's forces. And they agreed, by the way. 500 soldiers were ready to help and join Habib. But Umar ibn Sa'd actually blocked their way. And in order to honor Habib, they buried Habib separately from others. Same with Hur. As we know, Hur belonged to the opposite camp until the day of Ashur. And therefore, if you go to Karbala, may Allah give us the opportunity to go to Karbala again. But if you go to Karbala, you'll notice that Hur is buried very far from Karbala. You actually have to take a bus ride, a good 20 to 25 minutes away from Karbala itself. It's outside Karbala because the tribe of Hur came and took the body of Hur. So we hear a lot of these things, but we should be careful and we should ask certain questions. I want to talk today, now, in the few minutes that I have left, about what happened after Karbala. Today is the day of Jahlum, a day of great mourning, a day of great tragedy. Tragedies, my friends, have a language of their own. It's the language of resistance, of protest. Tragedies speak to our hearts, not only to our minds. And because of tragedies, we can relate to these stories. Tragedies bring us closer to God and bring us closer to those people who fought for these principles upon whom these tragedies fell. In many ways, the tragedy of Karbala talks to us. Talks to us. Why? Because it asks us to reevaluate our moral compass, the morality that I've been talking about. That how would I have behaved had I been in that situation? And therefore you'll recall in Ziyarat al-Warith we say, لو كنت معكم لأفوز معكم فوزا عظيما. Had I been with you, I would have given my life with you, a great jihad. I would have fought with you. I would have given my life with you. That's, in a way, we're telling ourselves that we are fully supportive of what they did. And had we been there, we would have joined them and given our life with them too. The power of the powerless, my sisters and brothers, lies in the morality of people. Why? Because these people, through their morality, through their sacrifices, they speak and touch the hearts and the souls of the people. Zainab bint Ali alayha salam has proven to us that the choice of words is a gift from God. Because just like Imam Ali, she was very eloquent. And therefore, as I mentioned, when she spoke in the darbar of Ibn Ziyad, Ibn Ziyad says she speaks like her father. Her father spoke like her. You see, the swords can pierce the skins, but words can pierce the heart and the souls of people. Sometimes after a little while, the skin may heal, but what enters the heart remains in the heart. And therefore, Zainab becomes so important, because had it not been for her and the Ahlul Bayt, then the tragedy of Karbala would have been silenced by Umar ibn Sa'd, by Ibn Ziyad, and also by Yazid. If Hussein fought with his sword, Zainab alayhi salam fought with her words. Remember, when she enters Kufa, the people of Kufa are rejoicing. They are actually celebrating. And yet when she left, and immediately after she spoke, the same people were weeping to the extent that even the beards of the men became wet with their tears. I remember a book that I translated called Ziyarat Guide. And a story in this particular one deeply touched me. That somebody, a sultan, says, I saw Imam Sahibul Zaman alayhi salam in my dream. And I asked him that in Ziyarat Nahiya, you talk of the tears of blood. Who are these tears of blood for? Was it for Imam Hussein? And the Imam said, no, because if Imam Hussein was there, he himself would have cried the tears of blood. So was this for Ali Akbar? He says, no. If Ali Akbar was there, he himself would have cried for the tears of blood. Who are these tears of blood for? He says it's for Zainab. Because what she had to endure, not only in Karbala, but also after Karbala. After Karbala, and then in Sham, and then back to Karbala, and then back to Medina. Zainab, when she speaks in Kufa, she says to the people of Kufa in public, when the people want to humiliate her, when they are celebrating her humiliation, what does she do? She says, O people of Kufa, may you weep more and may you laugh less. Do you know you have broken the heart of the Prophet today? You have killed his son and exposed the ladies to strangers. You are the people who invited my brother and then you killed him. What will you reply the Prophet? Have you thought about it? May Allah never stop your tears. May Allah punish you for what you have done. When the women folk heard that, they started crying. Says Zainab, what is this? It is ironic that in the same streets of Kufa, 25 years before that, Zainab was the daughter of Imam Ali. And now today, she is a prisoner in the streets of Kufa. As Zainab was speaking, the Ahlul Bayt noticed that there was one person who was on a horse with the head of a Shaheed, the head of Habib ibn Madahir actually. And a young boy was walking after that person, the man on the horse. When the man on the horse turned to this young boy and said, why do you keep following me? He said, don't you know, this is the head of my father you have. This is the head of Habib ibn Madahir, the head of my father. When Zainab enters the darbar of Ibn Ziyad says, haven't you seen what God has done to your brother? What does Zainab say at that time? Zainab says, oh Ibn Ziyad, Allah has honored us with prophecy. He honored us with the Quran. He has purified our house. He has given us martyrdom. Those who've been martyred are in heaven because martyrdom is our pride. Oh Ibn Ziyad, look at how bold Zainab was. You will have to answer for your sins. When he was asked, that what do you think, how do you think that God has treated your Hussein? She replies, God has decreed death for them. And they went bravely to their resting places. O Ibn Ziyad, God will gather you and us. Then we will see who has been triumphant on the day of Qiyamah. O Ibn Marjana, may your mother mourn for you. This was a very direct reply. It means that may Allah make your mother cry for you, O Ibn Ziyad. And then Ibn Ziyad wants to kill Imam Zainul Abidin. He turns to Zainul Abidin and says, how come this person has not been killed? Zainab, she goes and hugs Zainul Abidin. She says, Ibn Ziyad, you'll have to kill me first before you kill him. Three times Zainab saved the life of Ali ibn Hussein. One on the night of Shami Gharibahan, when the tents were burning, Zainab carried Imam Zainul Abidin outside the tent. Now in Kufa, the Darbar of Kufa, and again in the Darbar of Yazid, Zainab saves Imam Zainul Abidin. The next day, the Ahlul Bayt are told, now you have to go to Sham. The route to Sham was the longest route, by the way. I was in Lebanon this last year. When I went to near Beirut, there was a shrine there, a shrine of somebody called Khawla. They say it is the daughter of Imam Hussein. Some say she was part of the Qafila, but the Qafila actually passed through Lebanon too. This was a longer route that they took. They actually have a whole story of the route that Imam Hussein's army, the Ahlul Bayt, took from Kufa to Damascus. The head of Imam Hussein was taken along that route too. That whole event, Azadar and Hussein, lasted 1 year. As they entered close to Sham, Kulthum turns to Shimr and she says to Shimr, when we enter the Darbar of Yazid, please make us entered through the door at which there are not too many people. And Shimr asks why. Kulthum says, because when the people's gaze fall on the head of my brother, the gaze also falls on us, the women folk. I don't want people to see us without that hijab on. Yet Shimr did the opposite. He made sure that the ladies were along and close to the head of Imam Hussein. People in Damascus were also rejoicing. Damascus was actually decorated for this occasion. Some stories tell us, some riwayat tell us that the Ahlul Bayt were made to wait for 3 days just outside Damascus while it was decorated until they were entering Sham. Yazid was watching from his castle as the Ahlul Bayt entered Damascus and they were closing to the castle. Shimr was boasting to Yazid once they entered the darbar of Yazid. Shimr was boasting to Yazid of what he had done to Hussein. And then Yazid took his cane and started playing with the lips of Hussein. At that point, who stood up? It was Kulthum. She said, "Oh Shimr, oh Yazid, you are priding yourself in what you did to Hussein. Don't you know that when Hussein was a little baby, Jibreel would come and rock his cradle? Jibreel would come and rock his cradle. Oh Yazid, Allah will punish you." Azadarana Hussein. Zainab stood up also at this point. Through her speeches, she turned the people against Yazid. Yazid says to Zainab, "Your father and your brother were not real Muslims." Listen what Yazid is saying to Zainab, that your father and your brother were not real Muslims. Zainab stood up. She says, "It is because of them that you became Muslims. It is because of my father and my brother that you became Muslims. Oh Yazid, you observe the parda of your women and your slave girls, and yet you imprison the daughters and the granddaughters of the Prophet. You parade them in the streets. You will be taken to account for this, for all of what you have done, oh Yazid. May Allah's anger fall upon you. You can never ever blot the memory, our memory in the minds of the people, oh Yazid, because you are a heartless tyrant. You cannot subdue us with your violence." Because of the speeches of Zainab, the people started turning against Yazid too. Even Hind is supposed to be, according to the riwayah, the wife of Yazid. When she heard what she heard, she came out and says, "Yazid, shame upon you. Is this how you treat the beloved of Fatima and the granddaughter of the Prophet?" At that point, Yazid sent somebody on the member to do the adhan. Hi, whereas he's doing the adhan, Imam Zainul Abidin says, "Oh people, when you say Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, do you know who that Muhammad is? Do you know who we are? I am the son of the one who went for the Mi'raj. I am the son of Makkah and the son of Medina. I am the son of Safa and Marwa. I am the son of Ali. I am the son of Fatima." Hi, as he was saying this, and as the Mu'adhin reached, "Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah," Imam Zainul Abidin says, "Oh Yazid, is Muhammad your grandfather or my grandfather? Then why did you kill my father? Why did you imprison us, oh Yazid? Why do you keep us under such conditions?" The people started crying again. Azadar and Hussein, the riwayat said, many riwayat say that the kafilah was in Sham for 1 year. There was very little food. There was very little food coming through. The difficulties that the Ahlul Bayt face in Sham. That's why Imam Zainul Abidin said 3 times, Asham, Asham, Asham was the most difficult time. And the most difficult time of all the times in Sham was the passing away, the wafat of little Sakina. At that point, when Sakina passed away, Zainab goes to the lash of Sakina. She says, "Oh, Biti Sakina, you were an amanat of my brother to you. What am I going to answer my brother now?" Azadar and Hussein, after a year, Yazid calls Imam Zainul Abidin and he says that now you may go. I release you. Zainul Abidin says, oh Yazid, I cannot say anything until I speak to my aunt. When Imam Zainul Abidin goes to Zainab, she says, oh better Sajjad, tell Yazid that I have not mourned my brother enough. Tell him to give us a house so that the people can hear the story of what happened in Karbala. For 3 days, some riwayahs say for 7 days, the ladies of Damascus, the same ladies who were celebrating when Zainab came, now they have come to Zainab to give her condolences. They were crying for what happened to Hussein. Azadarana Hussein. Now the Kafilah is ready to leave Sham, to go towards Medina. But first they will stop in Karbala. I am sure that Zainab, for the final time, went to the qabr of Sakina and says, oh baby Sakina, come with us now. How can Zainab leave Sakina in Sham? Azadarana Hussein. As the Kafilah was nearing Karbala, the people who are near the grave of Hussein, some riwayat say it was Jabir ibn Allah al-Sari, but they were told to leave the grave of Hussein because Shahzadi now has come to pay her respect. As Zainab near the grave of Hussein, she came and she threw herself at the grave and she says, oh my brother, that amanat that you gave me is now lying in the darbar, in the graves in Sham itself. The ladies cried so much in Karbala. As I was saying yesterday, Rabahab did not leave Karbala. For 1 year, she cried and she stayed in Karbala. Bashir bin Jazlam goes to the outskirts of Medina. The Kafilah now are nearing Medina. She goes to the outskirts of Medina and calls out, oh people of Yathrib, come and pay your respects and condolences to the Ahlul Bayt. The people are coming out. Oh Bashir, what happened? Where are the people? Where is Hussein? One of the ladies who came was Banin. When Bashir sees Banin, she says to her, أحسن الله لك الأضحى لولدك العباس. I give you the condolences of your son Abbas. Banin says, don't tell me about Abbas, tell me about Hussein. He says, I give you condolences of your son Uthman, of Ja'far, of Abdullah. Banin says, I don't want to hear about them, tell me about Hussein. Finally Bashir says, I give you condolences for Hussein because he was killed. He was martyred in the plains of Karbala. At that time, the ladies came outside. They came outside Medina. The first one to speak was Kulthum. She says, oh ladies, when we left Medina, our houses were full. Our men were with us. Today now, no men have been killed. Hussein has been laid in the plains of Karbala. Hayazadarane Hussein. The ladies started telling them everything of what happened in Sham and in Karbala. And then the majalis were held, not only in Sham, even in Medina. Zainab, she goes to the Rawza of her grandfather and then to her mother. Oh my grandfather, oh my mother, how can I tell you what happened to Hussein? Where shall I start? Azadarana Hussein, one final anecdote before I finish. After the mosque of Medina, Zainab goes to her home. She's going home now. Just as she nears her home, she sees somebody coming on the opposite side. That person turns to the lady and she says, oh lady, what are you doing here? Why are you stopping here? Zainab looks at her husband. Says, Abdullah, you could not even recognize your own wife. Zainab had changed so much that even Abdullah could not recognize her. Finally, the ladies go to Banin again and they give all the marthi of what happened to Hussein. Banin says, oh ladies, tell me, when Hussein died, what had happened to my Abbas? They said Abbas had given his life for Hussein. He had given his life for Hussein. His hands were cut for Hussein. Al-Banin turns towards Karbala and says, oh Abbas, you've done me proud now. You have done me proud. Now I can stand in front of Fatima to Zahra. ألا لعنة الله لكم بالظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي الكلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين.
Ya Hussein.
Ya
Ya
Hussein.
Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, शोर है बन में आए हुसैना, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब। कौन सी हालत तुमको सुनाऊं, गुजरी है जो क्या वो बताऊं, बाद तुम्हारे बांधे गए हैं बाजू रसन में आए हुसैना, काम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, काम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, उठा है दिल में दर्द इसी से, कहती हूँ रोकर अपने ये दिल से, कब्र में क्यों कर चैन मिलेगा, जख्म है तन में आए हुसैना, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, देखो तो उठकर घर की तबाही, आधे खिजाने क्या है मचाई, फूल है बाकी और न गुंचे मेरे चमन में आए हुसैना, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, अहले मदीना पूछेंगे मुझसे काफिले वाले और कहाँ है, अहले मदीना पूछेंगे मुझसे काफिले वाले और कहाँ है, उनसे कहूँगी कोई नहीं है, उनसे कहूँगी कोई नहीं है, सोए हैं मन में आए हुसैना, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, शाम से छुटकर आई है ज़ैनब, और है बन में आए हुसैना, या हुसैन, या हुसैन,
Ya Hussein.
या हुसैन।
Ya Hussein. قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع، قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع، سید سجاد کا تھائے سخن الوداع، قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع، قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع، سید سجاد کا تھائے سخن ودا، ہوئی رہائی مجھے تربت بننے لگی، ٹوٹی ہوئی ہادیاں جسم میں ملنے لگی، قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع، قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع، سید سجاد کا آئے سخن قبر میں سب سونپ کے جاتا ہے یہ بے وطن، شکر ہے معبود کا مل گیا سب کو دفن،
قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد کا
سخن الوداع
قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد کا تائے سخن الوداع قبر حسین
الوداع اہل وطن الوداع قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد
کا
آئے سخن الوداع
ہوئی رہائی مجھے تربت بننے لگی ٹوٹی ہوئی ہادیا جسم میں
سے
ملنے
ملنے لگی قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد
سجاد کا
تائے سخن الوداع
بن گئی قبر تمام لکھ دیا ہر ایک پہ نام ختم ہوا یہ بھی کام آخری میرا سلام قبر
قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد
سجاد کا
تائے سخن الوداع
قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید
سجاد
سجاد
کا
کا
تائے سخن الوداع
قبر حسین
قبر وطن الوداع قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید
سجاد
سجاد
کا سخن الوداع رحم اللہ منازل الفاتحہ.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali Abbas. Just a couple of quick announcements before we go to Ziyarat. So just a reminder, Mu'mineen, we do have our Arbaeen drive-through this weekend, inshallah, from 10 a.m. to noon. So those of you who have registered, please, we humbly request you to show up on time, inshallah. Also, as part of the drive-through, we do have our partnership with Uplift Charity for a Cans Good Drive. They're specifically looking for kidney beans and canned corn. So please donate all that you can to help us reach our goal of 400 cans, inshallah. Our next program will be the wafat of our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as the shahadat of Imam Rada alayhi salam. That will be next Thursday and Friday, inshallah. So program announcements will be forthcoming in due time. With that, let's also, before we conclude with Ziyarat, let's recite Dua Shifa for those that are sick in our family and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma
يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما 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 يجيب
المستر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Abbas Ali, if you're out there, Bismillah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. زيارة الوارثة. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثار والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وأتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. ولعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في إسلام الشاملات والأرحام المطهرات لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من متلهمات ثيابها وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الذكي الهادي المهدي وأشهد أن أئمة من ولد كلمة التقوى وأعلم الهدى والأروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسوله أني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة حضرت علي عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن حسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن مظلوم. لعن الله متن قتلتك ولعن الله متن ظلمتك ولعن الله متن سميت بذلك فرزيت به. يا تشهد السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله ووداعه. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي ولي الناصر. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما ويا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها العبد الصالح مؤطيع لله ولرسوله ولأمير المؤمنين والحسن والحسين صلى الله عليه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشهد أنك قد جحدت ونسحت وصبرت حتى تأكل يقين. لعن الله الظالمين لكم من الأولين والآخرين والحق هم بدرك الجحيم. ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا غريب والغرباء. السلام عليكم يا سلطان أبو الحسن يا علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الثر والزمان. الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا شريف القرآن. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الثر والزمان ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك حجة
الحسن
صلواتك على في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الله
صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم. Ahsant. Once again, Dr. Takim, thank you very much for the last 4 nights. May Allah once again continue to increase your knowledge infinitely, inshallah.
And my honor, and I appreciate it. I give the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, mu'mineen, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Ahsan, Liyakat bhai.
Thank you. You're welcome. We miss seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you, Liyakat bhai.
You're welcome. I wish we could have met in person.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, one of these days.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
Khuda.